The Nintendo 64. There's a lot of history with me in this console, and I don't just mean the regular history on how the game was literally the evolution of 3D platformers. The Nintendo 64 for me was actually my introduction to gaming as a whole, as I got the N64 on my 6th birthday, and it came with a title that you'll probably see on this list, and I generally know there are a lot of haters for it. But that aside, I think it's about time I actually talk to you what are my favorite games on this console. But I'm going to do something a little differently this time around, as I'm going to throw in a few rules and guidelines. For one, I will not be including Super Mario 64, mostly because I feel like that's a major cop-out. Yes, I get it, it's the most successful game on the N64, and is the game that revolutionized 3D platforming on the console, and to Nintendo as a whole. And don't get me wrong, it's still a fantastic game, and if you do get a chance to try it out for yourself, you'll understand what I mean. Not only that, I won't be including it as well because I'll be only choosing one game per franchise. Doing it this way, I can actually do process of elimination on explaining why I think these are my favorite titles in these series. But sometimes you gotta think it's a little unfair to always keep putting the same title in the best of list. So that way, each Nintendo 64 title will get a fair game, with the only other exception being that I won't be choosing games that I actually physically or digitally own, whether it be on an original N64 cartridge or a digital title that's in my Wii and or Wii U. So no emulated games, and of course it won't be just the ones that I've actually grown up playing as, but it'll also be some newer titles I actually got my chance to actually get a hold of for the very first time and got to try out. I should also let you know F-Zero didn't make the list mostly because I do not own a physical or digital copy. And just so to get out of the way, no, I do not have the Nintendo 64 online service on the Nintendo Switch. I don't have it mostly because I don't really have a reason to own it, as I already own these titles in some way or form. And remember, this is my list and my personal opinions, but I am curious to know what your favorite N64 titles were. Let me know in the comments below. But other than that, time to get retro, baby! Starting with my lucky number, 13. Starting off the list is a Japanese exclusive that finally got a US release on the Nintendo Wii, along on the Wii U, which is where I'm playing on this, Sin and Punishment. I actually did play this game a few years back on stream. Follow me on Twitch. I'll explain the new name later, but Sin and Punishment I generally think is a really cool arcade shooter on a retro console. And the big reason I'm putting it this low on the list is mostly because of the control configuration. Now remember, I am playing this on the original Wii U, and I was not really a big fan of the control settings, so I had to customize it to my own thing to barely still work to settings I actually enjoy. I've never actually beaten the games, but that's more of a personal problem. I might give this game another go, and who knows, maybe it would have actually ranked higher if I gave the game another chance. And surprisingly enough, that's actually what I did with our next game on number 12. Yeah, Mischief Makers actually did make my list. Mischief Makers was a Nintendo game I actually will be 100% real with you. I actually didn't like when I first played it. I did it for a one-off video on weird and obscure video game titles, and heck, I didn't even do a full-fledged playthrough of the game. However, when making this video, I decided to give the game a second chance, and played the game on Twitch. And I don't know, maybe it was because I was using a Retro Fighter controller this time around, but I think the game finally clicked for me, and I can understand why a lot of people really liked it. Sure, I haven't beaten the game yet, nor did I ever try to do the 100% thing. I think the game has some really good controls, hilarious gimmicks, great humor, and it's one of the few 2D platformers on the N64. Which now I say out loud, that's pretty crazy considering Nintendo is really known for platformers. I generally know some people will be disappointed that this N64 classic didn't really make it as high on my list, but oh boy, you're gonna be really shocked when I put out the next part of this list. Heck, I'm even shocked too. Yes, this actually happened. Nope, your screen is not lying. Super Smash Bros. Is at number 11 in my top 13. And this is coming from a guy who literally makes moveset concepts on his YouTube channel 5 times a year. But why did I put it this low? And that's simple. There's honestly no reason to go back to this game. When it comes to all the other Smash titles, honestly there's a lot more to go back to on the later series than there really is the original N64 version, other than just nostalgia. Still, Super Smash Bros. Leaves a major impact to the franchise and to Nintendo and video gaming as a whole. But if you really want to go back to the original Smash Bros., but with a little extra beef and potatoes, I highly recommend checking out Smash Remix. You've probably never even heard of this game, and you're also probably thinking, why haven't I heard of this game? Disney's Magical Tetris Challenge is one of the most craziest versions of Tetris I have ever played. and it's also one of my personal favorite renditions of the Tetris gameplay. Sure, the roster is surprisingly small, and there is a lot of different types of replayability in the story mode, but what really makes the game more interesting is the multitude of challenges and different variants of Tetris battling you can do. Whether it be doing a full-fledged Tetris or even doing crazy combos with Tetraminos, you also get some brand new, never-before-seen shapes that actually really change up the medium of the game. It's honestly, in my personal opinion, the most competitive Tetris game I have ever played. It's a real shame that Disney, Capcom, and the Tetris Company would forget such a really awesome Tetris title. Though I will say, it is a game I actually do want to see on the Nintendo Switch Online. I should probably say this now, but Mario Kart didn't make the list. And neither did Diddy Kong Racing, but I'm not sorry for that. But for real, Snowboard Kids 2 is like one of the most innovative and one of the most awesome racing games you'll never get to play again. Mostly because Atlas wants to forget that this franchise even existed. Snowboard Kids 2 is still one of my personal favorite racing games, even though the game itself is pretty difficult for new players. But it has some really crazy racing mechanics that you love from Mario Kart 64, as well as a really cool trick system, and of course the big challenge of getting back to the slope first. I've actually done a video retrospective on the Snowboard Kids series, so I highly recommend checking that out, even though I'll admit that video has not aged well. Yeah, this is going to come across as a bit of a surprise to a lot of people, but I never really grew up with The Legend of Zelda. In fact, the first Legend of Zelda game I would actually own would be Spirit Tracks on the Nintendo DS. Though the second title I would own is The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, which I only got to play on my Nintendo Wii because I got it for free thanks to my Nintendo points. And I'll admit, I think the Legend of Zelda series is pretty good. Though the reason I chose Majora's Mask over Ocarina of Time was mostly because I've never actually played Ocarina of Time. I'm on the original hardware. I only got to play the 3DS version, which, by the way, I totally forgot to mention, no ports or remakes whatsoever, so titles like Star Wars Racer wouldn't even make it on this list, unfortunately. Unless I think the original version is better. And unluckily for my knowledge, Majora's Mask 3D actually changed things not for the better, but for the worse, so the N64 version is apparently still the best version of the game. Unfortunately, I don't think the game is as great as everyone always says it is. But please hear me out. I think the game has some great mechanics, and the mask system is really cool, as well as developing the world of Clocktown and the mysterious Skull Kid. But there were always two major things that made me not think of it as one of my top 5 favorite games. One, I do think the clock system is not as great as people say it is. And yes, I do know you can slow down time and make it go faster, but even then the 3-day cycle can be a little arduous for new players like myself at the time. And secondly, the water temple in this game is horrible. And apparently in the Ocarina of Time remake, it's somehow even worse. I still say the game is good, it's still in this top 10 for a reason, and you just gotta accept that. Speaking of not perfect, I will generally say the original Pokemon stadiums are not really as great as people say they are. It's literally just the mainline Pokemon games, except without the adventure part, and you only get the rental teams, and they kinda suck. Which is why I basically gave Pokemon Snap the win, because for one, it's one of my personal favorite N64 titles of the Pokemon series, and it definitely makes you feel like you're actually in the world of Pokemon, interacting with all the other species of the Kanto era, taking photos of all your favorite Pokemon doing the funnest activities, and just having a grand old time. And it makes me really happy we finally got a long-awaited sequel to Pokemon Snap. It was about damn time. Anyone remember Bomberman? Well, truth be told, he was actually one of my favorite video game characters at the time, and you could probably thank Bomberman 64 for that reason. I was originally thinking of putting Bomberman Hero on this list, but I feel like the Bomberman 64 title definitely feels more like a Bomberman game, as you try to use bombs in a more strategic way, while trying not to blow yourself up in worst case scenarios. But of course, what makes the original game fun was the multiplayer, as I don't think Bomberman Hero actually had that. You can quote me if I'm wrong, and you could probably understand the reason why I didn't put Bomberman Hero 2 on here. We're in the top 5 now, and these are honestly my 5 all-time favorite games on the N64. And there are still a lot of good choices on here, but we can't deny Kirby 64 The Crystal Shards was a really awesome Kirby game. One of the few 2D platformers Nintendo would actually make on the console, though more 2.5D similar to Klonoa or the Phantom Isle. Kirby 64 I generally think is still an entertaining time, and of course it had one of the best Kirby copyability gimmicks of all time, where you actually had different types of copyabilities depending on whether or not you had one or two combinations. Some were bad, some were awesome, and of course the game was awesome. And now here comes one of the most controversial opinions I have on this list. Donkey Kong 64 is actually a good N64 title, and you were wrong to think otherwise. Yes, I will admit, the game itself isn't perfect, but I still say it's really one of my personal favorite N64 titles, even though it's at number 4 of a top 13. I know a lot of people like to complain about the 3D collectathon in this game as there's like literally too much to collect. Dude, you can literally collect everything in this 3D collectathon in roughly 20 hours if you're fast enough. And I've seen people beat the game in even faster times. Instead of complaining about how big everything is and how much there's to collect, I like to think of Donkey Kong 64 as a pseudo 3D open world collectathon, as you literally go almost all around the DK Isles, trying to collect all 200 bananas in order to save your island. Obviously, I won't say everything's perfect. The tag barrel system, I will admit, needed a little more fine-tuning, and there are some golden bananas I will not defend for my life. Looking at you, Beaver Bother. Now that we're at our number 3 spot, oh, who are you kidding? You obviously know Banjo-Kazooie is going to be on this list, though I had to choose between whether I'd go with Banjo-Kazooie or Banjo-Tooie. Banjo-Kazooie is one of the most innovative 3D platformers at the time, inspiring other well-known 3D platformers, even being the 3D platformer that would rival Mario 64. I think Banjo-Tooie does what the original does and improves upon it. For one, you get all the moves from the first game entirely at the start, get tons of brand new moves, go through a lot of the worlds of Banjo-Kazooie in the best way possible, in fact having some of the best worlds in the game. And yes, even Rare knew that the game was so big that the game's running speed would not work well with it, that they actually decided to work around it. But the big reason why I chose Tooie over Kazooie was because of one reason, and that would be the note system in the game. Now, for those who've only played Banjo-Kazooie and Tooie on the Xbox, you don't know what I'm talking about. In the original Banjo-Kazooie, notes were actually more like a grading system. Depending on how many notes you collected, whether you entered or leave the world, or when you perished, the notes would automatically reset. So you literally had to collect every single note again every time you entered that world. Tooie, however, decided to make the notes into bundles, which made it far more easy to collect, in my personal opinion. I would rather break my fingers for the rematch against Canary Mary than collect every single note in Rusty Bucket Bay. So those of you who started Banjo-Kazooie on the Xbox 360, you guys got it lucky. Yeah, Mario didn't make the number 1 spot, but Mario's probably the big reason why I did one video game per franchise, as literally half this countdown would have been Mario games entirely, whether it been the fun craziness of Mario Parties 2 and 3, the fun racing of Mario Kart 64, and of course the revolutionary title that was Super Mario 64. And my most personal favorite choice in this list, Paper Mario. In fact, it was originally going to be my number 1 title on the N64. It was the game that got me into RPGs. I loved the fun little gimmicks, and yes, I know this was originally planned to be a Super Mario RPG too, but I'm really glad that it didn't become that and became its own thing entirely. I love the characters, I love the world, I love the Bowser interactions. Heck, I did an entire playthrough of the original Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door remake on my Twitch and my YouTube. That's how much I love this game. And I think Nintendo realizes how great the original series is now, as both the original and Thousand Year Door are on the Switch, and hopefully compatible for the Switch too. But you're probably now wondering what's my number 1 favorite game on the Nintendo 64. Well, let's find out. Paper Mario was the game that made me love the Mario series. Star Fox 64 is the game that made me love Nintendo games. It's kind of a weird choice to put this one as my number 1, but personally, as I was playing through this old school title yet again for this video, I fell in love with the series once again. It may surprise you, but I'm actually a huge Star Fox fan. I actually own every single Star Fox title 64 onward. And yes, I generally know that the 3DS technically had a remake of this title, but I still love the game whether it was remade or not. It's still kind of sad to see that Nintendo has had no idea what to do with this franchise since the N64 version. I love the visuals, I love the arcade style, I love that the game has some unique branching paths and unique gimmicks to get those branching paths. When playing this game again, I felt like a young kid at the arcade discovering tons of these awesome game titles that I'd love to know more of. I'll be 100% honest, I'm not really crazy about Star Trek or even Star Wars, but for me, my favorite thing in sci-fi will always be Star Fox. And with that, you now know all my favorite N64 games. And of course, I want to thank all of you guys who subscribe to this YouTube channel and actually watch my newer stuff along with my older stuff. And as you can probably tell, things are going to be a little different on the channel here, especially since you'll be saying goodbye to this version of me, as yet again, I go for another character change. But this isn't the end, but a whole nother beginning, as starting in March, we'll be going through a channel rebrand. So, thank you for watching, tune in next time as this is the AngelStar, signing out from Star Jettison.